Hey guys, tonight we're hitching up our oxen, loading the wagons and setting off into one of the grimiest, most grueling yet weirdly romanticised adventures in American history. Yeah, we're talking about the Oregon Trail, the ultimate choose-your-own disaster experience. You've probably heard of it, maybe even died of dysentery on an old-school classroom computer, but tonight you're going to live it. And spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments what city you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It starts in the spring of 1846. You've spent the winter in Missouri watching the snow melt and waiting for the land to thaw. Now it's April, and the buzz in Independence is electric. Dozens of families like yours, wagons lined up for days, oxen steaming in the morning chill. You're leaving behind a modest farmhouse, your favourite tree, your town, maybe even some relatives who think you're insane for going west. But you've got gold-tinted dreams and whispers of lush farmland in Oregon Territory. In truth, you don't really know what's out there. You just know it has to be better than what you're leaving behind. Debts, over-farmed land, and yet another year of not enough rain. There's an odd energy in the air. Some people are giddy, treating this like a grand vacation. Others have that 1,000-yard stare, like they've already imagined every one of their children buried in a shallow grave. You're caught in between. You've packed, repacked, and repacked again. You've argued with your spouse about whether to bring the rocking chair. You've bought enough flour to bake bread for an entire cavalry. And yet, even with all this planning, there's a gnawing feeling that something, maybe many somethings, are going to go very wrong. Your wagon is sturdy, or so the man who sold it claimed. The canvas top is stretched over wooden bows, offering shade but not much else. Inside, you've crammed in everything from barrels of bacon and beans to a small iron stove you absolutely insisted on bringing, despite your cousin's warning that it's dead weight. You've got rifles, a cast iron skillet, a coffee grinder, and one slightly smushed porcelain doll for your daughter. And yet already you're wondering if it's too much. You hear the oxen before you see them. Snorting massive beasts with the kind of eyes that seem older than civilization itself. You're told they're better than horses, slower yes, but steadier. Less likely to break a leg. You pat one on the side and it lets out a sound that's equal parts bored and disgusted. It's going to be a long ride. On the morning of departure, the town is chaos. Children are crying, mothers are snapping at fathers, and a guy named Lester is arguing about who gets to be wagon master. Spoiler, you do not want to be wagon master. It's a glorified babysitting job where you get blamed for every wrong turn, a lost ox, and misjudged river depth. But you also don't want Lester doing it. He once tried to trade a live chicken for a haircut. You vote for the quiet farmer from Ohio instead. He seems less likely to steer you into a canyon. Your first steps on the trail are weirdly underwhelming. There's no trumpet fanfare, no cinematic sweep of prairie grass. Just a muddy path and the creak of wooden wheels. The realization hits you like a sack of flour. You're walking a lot. Sure, you could ride in the wagon, but only if you want to jostle against barrels and be crushed by shifting cargo. So you walk. Everyone does, except the elderly and the injured, which you're not yet, but give it time. A strange mix of emotions follows. Excitement flares when you pass the last general store. Fear kicks in once you realize that everything familiar is now behind you. The trees start to thin out, the houses vanish, and the land rolls flat and wide. It's beautiful in a desolate sort of way, like being on another planet made entirely of grass and bugs. Speaking of bugs, they are immediate and aggressive. By the first night, you've slapped more mosquitoes than you can count and learned that prairie gnats fly directly into your eyes on purpose, probably out of spite. You pitch camp beside a lazy creek and everyone tries to pretend this is fun. Fires are built, songs are sung, someone even tries to tell a joke. But the truth is, you're already tired, your boots are too stiff, and the kids won't stop asking when you'll be there. As you lie on a blanket beneath the wagon, because tent space is tight, you find yourself listening. The distant lowing of oxen, the rhythmic snoring of the family next to yours. A coyote, maybe, or someone's very sick mule. The night is cold and the ground is harder than you expected. Your hip already hurts. The stars above are breathtaking though, an ocean of silver, so wide and clear it feels like falling upward. You tell yourself this will be worth it, that in 6 months you'll have your own land, your own home, and a chance at something better. But for now, you can't shake the feeling that you've just made the biggest mistake of your life. Here's your historical fact of the night. Roughly 400,000 people travelled the Oregon Trail between the 1830s and 1860s. That's like emptying a modern football stadium and marching everyone 2,000 miles across unforgiving terrain with nothing but wooden wagons and hope. Quirky fact, some people actually brought pianos, like real pianos. Spoiler, they didn't make it. Many ended up abandoned on the side of the trail like a trail of broken dreams and out-of-tune ambitions, and a hot debate. Scholars still argue over whether the journey was fueled more by religious zeal, economic desperation, or just good old American wanderlust. Probably all three, plus a hefty scoop of not knowing what the heck they were in for. By the second day, your feet already hate you. You wake up feeling like you've been trampled by your own oxen, which honestly might have happened, considering how badly they sleepwalk when spooked by coyotes. Your back is sore from the ground, your eyes crusted with dust, and your boots feel like medieval torture devices. Still, you're up with the sun because that's what trail life demands. There are no snooze buttons out here, only the sounds of creaking wheels, squawking chickens, and someone already yelling about lost coffee beans. You choke down a breakfast of damp cornbread and coffee made from yesterday's boiled grounds, and then it's back to the same old rhythm. Pack up camp, yell at the children, yoke the oxen, curse whoever made the decision to pack your entire life into a rolling wooden box and drag it across half a continent. By mile 10, it becomes painfully clear. Riding in the wagon is a fantasy. The jostling alone could dislodge your spine. Every bump in the trail is a full-body event. It's smoother to walk, sort of. Well, not smoother, but you don't feel like your brain is being knocked loose with every rut and rock. The wagons creak and groan like ships on dry land, and your feet thud against the hard-packed earth in a steady, dragging beat. You thought this would be an adventure, a westward journey like the ones in penny novels. What you didn't count on is how mind-numbing the routine would be. Wake, walk, eat, walk, set up camp, sleep, repeat, and this is just the beginning. By mid-morning you start noticing something else. Your fellow travellers are getting on your nerves. Turns out putting 50 strangers together in tight quarters with minimal hygiene and lots of beans leads to tension. Someone's dog keeps chasing chickens. Another guy insists on playing the fiddle while walking. You didn't know it was possible to play off key while fiddling one string, but here we are. And don't even get started on the woman who keeps humming the same hymn over and over like it's a magic spell. Still, there's a certain comfort in the group, like a slow-moving herd of anxious buffalo. You travel in clusters, sometimes 3 or 4 wagons across, blocking the trail and arguing about whether this counts as making good time. You form friendships, grudges, and vague alliances like it's some wagon train reality show. There's always one couple having a loud fight by the fire, someone who's just a little sick but coughing up a lung, and that one guy who won't stop talking about his land claim in Oregon like he already owns half the territory. You try to keep your spirits up. After all, the scenery is changing. You're leaving behind the scrubby edges of Missouri and moving into open plains, golden waves of grass that ripple with every gust of wind. It's beautiful, but it's also endless. The land seems to stretch forever, flat and shimmering in the sun, with no trees in sight. And the trail itself is just 2 dusty grooves beaten into the earth by thousands of wagons that came before you. A rut of history, and now you're in it. You get to know your wagon in ways you never wanted to. Every creak is a new fear. Every lurch means something is shifting, probably in the worst possible way. The back wheel is always threatening to pop off, the canvas top flaps in the wind like it's mocking you. Inside, everything is packed tight. Barrels, bedding, tools, and somehow it still smells like wet wood and old cheese. You tried to keep things organised, but the first time you hit a pothole the size of a bathtub, your careful packing turned into a chaotic stew of flour, boots, and personal shame. Your oxen, bless their plodding, slobbery souls, are the real MVPs. Slow, yes, but strong and stubborn like trail-borne tanks. You talk to them now, half out of boredom, half out of the creeping suspicion they're smarter than some of the people in your party. You name them ridiculous things, Butterscotch and Thunderhoof. You don't know why, but it helps. When Thunderhoof poops mid-walk, you just sigh and step around it like you've been doing this your whole life. Around midday, you finally stop to rest. It's hot, Your shirt sticks to your back and you swear you've never drunk so much water in your life and still felt dry. The group circles up near a sparse patch of trees, shade, blessed shade, and someone passes around biscuits that taste like flour and sadness. You stretch your legs, check the wagon wheels, and try to ignore the growing pile of flies buzzing around your food. Someone suggests pushing on another 5 miles before sundown. A groan ripples through the camp. This, you realize, is the real Oregon Trail experience. It's not the cholera, not yet. It's the constant motion, the monotony, the way your body begins to rebel even as your brain numbs. You've barely travelled 30 miles and already you feel like you've aged a year. Your muscles ache, your nerves fray, and every little sound, oxen snorting, someone whining about dry bread, feels like a personal attack. Historically, pioneers covered an average of 15 to 20 miles a day on a good stretch. But not every day is good. Rain, wheel breakage, sick animals, everything slows you down. And you haven't even hit a real obstacle yet. This is the easy part. This is the warm-up. Quirky fact. Some pioneers actually brought homemade wagon seats designed to swing from the canvas ribs, sort of like hammock chairs so they could avoid the brutal jostling. Most of these snapped or dumped their passengers straight into flour barrels during the first rough trail patch. You chuckle at the memory of one woman hanging upside down like a flustered bat, legs tangled in a bonnet, shrieking at her husband. And here's something scholars still debate. Why did so many pioneers assume they could just figure it out once they got to Oregon? Many didn't know how to farm, build homes, or even hunt. They just believed the land would provide. It's still unclear whether this was sheer optimism, or just the most aggressive group manifestation in history. By the time you make camp again, your boots are crusted with mud, your legs feel like jelly, and your youngest has developed a mysterious rash. You're too tired to care. You lay back under the wagon, your body bruised and baking in the late sun, and stare up at the underside of your home on wheels. It's only been 2 days, but you already understand something crucial. This trail is going to strip you down. No illusions, no comforts, just you, the road, and a whole lot of walking. By the end of your first week on the trail, you've discovered that this journey is less of a solo mission and more like a slowly unravelling, small-town drama on wheels. Your wagon isn't just yours anymore. It's part of a larger caravan, a ragtag collective of roughly 20 families bound together by desperation, wild ambition, and the hope that someone else packed more beans than you did. You quickly learn that survival out here isn't just about strength or endurance. It's about teamwork, politics, and a whole lot of compromise. Every morning starts with a group meeting. The wagon master, quiet Ohio guy still in charge for now, gathers everyone around and lays out the route for the day. He's calm and reasonable, which is probably why everyone's secretly preparing to overthrow him. Decisions have to be made constantly. Do you take the flatter northern route that adds mileage but saves the oxen? Or the shortcut through the rocky hills that has a 50-50 chance of wrecking a wheel or two? Votes are cast, opinions are shared, and someone always manages to make it personal. You never realised how many different ways there are to argue about the direction north. Some swear by compasses, others by the sun, and one guy just follows the behaviour of squirrels. You silently vow never to listen to the squirrel guy again after his last shortcut led to a 6-hour detour and an argument so loud it scared off the wildlife. Then there's the issue of wagon spacing. Too close and you risk a wheel-to-wheel disaster, too far and you're vulnerable to attacks. Well, theoretically. Mostly the danger is losing sight of the caravan and getting hopelessly turned around in what looks like a grassy sea of sameness. So you keep close, trailing behind your neighbour's wagon while trying to ignore the way their supplies are tied down with string and prayer. You're all in this together, like it or not. Soon the caravan starts to splinter into roles. There's the wagon master, of course, who becomes more of a therapist than a leader. There's a scout, a wiry guy with eyes like a hawk and the social skills of a raccoon, who rides ahead to look for rivers, trails, and potential hazards. He rarely speaks unless it's bad news, and when he does speak, it's usually along the lines of, "That bridge is a lie," or, "We'll have to eat the mule." Charming fellow. You find yourself pulled into these group dynamics more than you'd like. Someone needs help fixing a broken wheel. You're suddenly a carpenter. A child has wandered off after a butterfly. You're now a tracker. Someone needs extra lard for tonight's beans. You're somehow the lard guy. Cooperation becomes a necessity, not a choice. But so does gossip. Oh, the gossip. Who's feuding with whom, who's been hoarding sugar, Who's secretly carrying more whiskey than anyone admitted? Every campfire brings fresh drama. It's like Survivor Prairie Edition. Sometimes things get tense. A bad decision from the wagon master, like choosing a muddy shortcut, results in days lost and patience worn thin. People start murmuring about forming a new group, electing a new leader. You find yourself caught in quiet conversations, little factions forming around personalities instead of reason. You side with the group that seems least likely to yell at you before coffee. There's also a growing concern about fairness. Who gets to stop for breaks? Who leads the line when the trail narrows? Who decides how long the noon halt lasts? These sound like minor issues, but after a week of blisters, heat and dust in every bodily crevice, they feel monumental. You watch grown adults argue for 20 minutes about whether it's time to circle the wagons or keep moving. Meanwhile, the oxen are falling asleep where they stand. One day, a decision has to be made about leaving someone behind. A man's axle is broken, and he doesn't have a spare. It's early in the trail, and most families are still hoarding their extra parts like gold. He begs. His wife is crying. His children look dazed and dust-covered. The wagon master says if someone gives him an axle, the whole train has to wait a day for repairs. The man from Kentucky volunteers. He has an extra. But as soon as he offers, someone else complains that it'll slow everyone down. Tensions rise, voices escalate. In the end, the vote is split. The wagon master casts the tiebreaker. The caravan waits. And just like that, a sense of unity returns. For now, you spend the day helping patch up the broken wagon. Others gather wood, check oxen shoes, and share food. It's weird how close you can feel to people after only a week of eating dust together. You laugh more that evening than you have since leaving Missouri. A girl braids your daughter's hair. A young man tries to play harmonica but only knows one song and keeps starting it over. For a moment, everything feels almost cozy. Here's your historical fact. Real-life wagon trains were often organised with detailed rules. Some even wrote constitutions, complete with fines for rule breaking. One train fined a man $2 for swearing in front of children. Trail just is fast and kind of adorable. Now for a quirky fact, some caravans had unofficial judges who were elected to settle disputes. These were usually just stern-looking older men with no real legal background. But they carried the gavel, sometimes literally. In one case, a man ruled on a dispute between two women over pie theft. Justice was served. The pie was not. As for scholarly debate, historians still argue whether the wagon train system created democratic micro-societies or just barely organised chaos. Some say it was a proto-version of the American frontier town, with evolving social norms and even primitive elections. Others call it a Lord of the Flies on Wheels situation, held together by shared desperation and salted pork. That night, you lie awake thinking about the people you're travelling with. Strangers turned companions, rivals turned teammates. You wonder who will be there at the end of this trail. And quietly, you wonder if you will be. There comes a moment, usually around day 10, when you realise you packed your entire life into a wooden box the size of a garden shed and dragged it into the wilderness like that was a rational decision. You stare into the wagon, sweat soaking your collar, and wonder why in the blazing prairie sun you thought it was necessary to bring 4 cast iron pans, a rocking chair, and your uncle's taxidermied duck. It's not just clutter now, it's dead weight, and dead weight has to go. But first, everyone is precious about their belongings. There's a weird pride in how neatly things were packed, like you're all contestants on some frontier version of Tetris. But now, on a scorching afternoon when the trail becomes more sand than soil, and your oxen are looking at you like you're personally responsible for their misery, something shifts. You realise every extra pound is another minute of suffering, another reason the wheel creaks with that horrible splintering sound no one wants to hear. And so the great shedding begins. It starts subtly. A broken stool, a bucket that cracked in the heat. Easy choices. But soon, hard decisions have to be made. A woman you've barely spoken to is weeping as she hands off her china teacups to the prairie wind. A man tosses out a family portrait after a tense debate with his teenage son, who insists that hauling it is pointless. You try to pretend it's all logical, survival-based, but there's grief laced in every item left behind. These things weren't just cargo, they were memories, comforts, the last threads of the lives you all left back in Missouri. Your own sacrifices come with a little less ceremony. That stove you insisted on bringing? Gone. rolled down a small hill and abandoned next to a surprisingly dignified pile of rejected bedposts. You keep the skillet, the coffee grinder, and your one luxury, a slightly water-stained copy of Gulliver's Travels. It doesn't weigh much, and some nights, reading by firelight keeps you from screaming at the sky. Food and supplies take priority now. Everyone starts double-checking their rations. Flour, salt, coffee, sugar. If you have it, you count it twice. If you don't, you start eyeing the neighbour's wagon and wondering if they'd notice a few spoonfuls missing. The flour barrels are shrinking faster than you hoped. Someone realises their bacon has gone rancid. The stench is immediate and offensive, like a punch in the sinuses. You'd help them bury it, feeling equal parts sad and envious that they hadn't enough bacon to rot in the first place. You also learn about a new unit of measurement. Space. Every inch matters. That small corner behind the wheel hub, suddenly perfect for rope. The hollow space under the tool chest, excellent for dried beans. Children get crammed between bags of rice and crates of canned peaches. Nobody's comfortable, nobody's clean. You're all just bags of humanity being shuffled daily across an unforgiving landscape. And then there's the constant battle with the wagon itself. You've never hated wood so much in your life. The planks warp in the heat. The wheels wobble no matter how often you reinforce them. Your husband or wife is perpetually covered in axle grease, swearing softly as they tighten spokes with a stick and sheer willpower. You joke about building a new wagon from all the parts being jettisoned along the way. Someone laughs, then seriously considers it. Resourcefulness or madness? Hard to tell anymore. Midweek, you cross a stretch of prairie so flat and wide it feels like the edge of the world. The trail is marked only by the faded remains of broken furniture, spilled nails, and the occasional tragic doll head staring blankly at the sky. You pass a chair with only one leg, a boot missing its partner, a Bible, pages fluttering in the wind like tiny white flags. It's a ghostly procession of dreams discarded, and it reminds you that most people ahead of you probably went through the same agonizing triage of personal belongings. By now, conversations at night have shifted. Less about the future, more about the practical. How many sacks of flour do you have left? Who's good at mending boots? Has anyone figured out how to patch a hole in canvas without it immediately tearing again? Someone shares a tip about soaking dried beans in river water overnight to make them cook faster. Another person, older and meaner, says you're all fools for not bringing hardtack. Bugs don't eat it, and neither do we, he growls, chewing it anyway. Historical side note. Most wagons had to carry 600 to 1,000 pounds of flour alone, plus bacon, lard, beans, rice, and a disturbingly large amount of coffee. Every family brought what they thought they'd need to survive 6 months, forgetting that surviving also meant dragging all that stuff across mountain ranges and rivers without the benefit of paved roads or common sense. Quirky fact, one woman brought up a grandfather clock, convinced it would be useful for maintaining a sense of order. It lasted 5 days before toppling over in the wagon and shattering into a pile of metaphor. She reportedly turned the clock face into a skillet lid. Now that's frontier innovation. And here's a fun academic squabble. Some historians claim the iconic covered wagon, the prairie schooner, was rarely used for actual riding due to discomfort and danger. Others argue that families routinely rotated riders to rest the elderly and young. No one can quite agree how much time pioneers spent inside their wagons versus trudging outside in the dust. What's certain? You're definitely not riding. You're hoofing it day after day because it turns out human legs are more reliable than hand-built wheels. That evening you settle into camp and take stock. You've lost a few items to the trail gods, but you've gained something else. Ruthlessness. You look at every object with suspicion now. Does it earn its space? Does it pull its weight? If not, it goes. Sentimentality gets you nowhere when your back is sore and your oxen are drooling from exhaustion. You sit near the fire, chewing on dry jerky that tastes like leather, mixed with regret. A nearby wagon is burning their broken bed frame and the flames crackle like applause. Someone passes around a jug of something vaguely alcoholic. You take a sip and cough violently, but your muscles relax for the first time in days. You think about home, your old house, the chair by the window, the dishes you left behind. You miss it all and none of it at the same time. What you've really left behind, you're starting to realise, is comfort, and there's no going back. You're not quite sure when the dread sets in, but it hits one morning, just as you squat behind a bush with a shovel in one hand and an unsettling gurgle in your gut. There are no bathrooms on the Oregon Trail, just open prairie, a bit of modesty, and a desperate hope that no one's looking. You dig fast, do your business even faster, and pray the wind doesn't shift. Welcome to the glamorous life of a westward pioneer, where your daily bowel movements are a public health hazard and also the #1 cause of death on the trail. It turns out dysentery is not just a funny punchline on an old computer game. It is a living, gut-twisting nightmare that moves through the camp like an invisible storm, wiping out dignity and hydration in equal measure. And it's not alone. There's cholera, typhoid, scurvy, and something the wagon master refers to ominously as plains fever. All you know is that people are sweating, vomiting, and collapsing in ways that no amount of herbal tea can fix. The root of all this? Hygiene, or the complete and utter lack of it. Soap is precious and mostly reserved for clothes, which still end up looking like they were washed in sadness. Bathing is a rare treat, something you do only when the weather's perfect, the river's deep enough, and you're feeling brave enough to expose your bare backside to an audience of mosquitoes and judging squirrels. Clothes stay on until they practically walk off by themselves. By week 3, you could bottle the smell of your boots and sell it as eau de regret. You do your best to stay clean. You wipe your hands with rags soaked in vinegar. You rinse dishes with sand and prayer. But there's only so much you can do when you're sharing a ladle with 20 other people and the nearest clean water is downstream from where the oxen bathe, drink, and relieve themselves. You start to play a mental game. Is this sickness from the beans, the water, or just the creeping realization that you made a terrible life choice? Sickness moves fast out here. One kid starts coughing on Monday, and by Wednesday half the caravan is walking like zombies. You watch a woman boil rags for compresses while muttering about garlic poultices. Someone else suggests bleeding the sick to balance the humours. You nod politely and then quietly hide all the sharp objects. There's no doctor among you, just rumours of one farther down the trail near Fort Laramie. You pray you'll make it that far. One evening, the camp is quiet. Too quiet. A man named Harris, older, always joked he was too stubborn to die, hasn't moved from his bedroll in hours. His wife stands over him, fanning him with her bonnet while others gather nearby, pretending not to stare. You catch a glimpse of his face, pale, sweating and drawn tight like a sheet left too long in the sun. No one says the word, but everyone's thinking it. Cholera, the death sentence in disguise. Here's your historical fact for the night. Cholera was the leading killer on the Oregon Trail, responsible for an estimated 10,000 deaths. That's 10,000 people who set off for a better life and never made it past Nebraska. Spread through contaminated water and poor sanitation, and it could kill in a matter of hours. You could go to bed with a stomachache and be buried by sunrise. Quirky fact, some people try to ward off disease by wearing garlic necklaces, burning animal dung, or placing silver coins in their drinking barrels. One woman swore by keeping a potato in her pocket to draw the fever out. It worked about as well as you'd expect. Meanwhile, scholars still argue about how much the pioneers actually understood about germs. Germ theory wasn't widely accepted yet, so a lot of folks blamed bad air, unlucky stars, or moral failings. Some journals describe people moving their wagons to avoid sick winds, or burying the dead facing away from camp to prevent spirits from returning. It wasn't science, but when you're desperate, superstition feels oddly comforting. Back in camp, Harris passes away just before dawn. His wife doesn't cry. She just folds his blanket, tucks it under his chin, and sits quietly until someone comes with a shovel. They bury him on a small hill overlooking the trail, pile stones on top to keep the animals away, and carve his name into a piece of oak. A few people say a prayer. Most just keep their heads down, focused on not being next. You help dig the grave, because everyone helps. The soil is dry and packed tight, the kind of earth that resists intrusion. As you shovel, sweat dripping into your eyes, you wonder how many more graves you'll dig before this is over. Probably too many. It's a sobering thought, one that follows you even after the sun rises and the wagons creak back into motion. From that day forward, you see the trail differently, not just as a road to Oregon, but as a corridor of loss. Every few miles there's another grave, sometimes marked, sometimes not. You pass makeshift headstones with names fading in the wind, little crosses of willow wood, even one coffin wedged awkwardly between two boulders. You start to recognize the signs, a group walking slower than usual, someone missing from the evening circle, a bundle of clothes left behind without ceremony. At night, when the fire flickers low and the stars feel too close, you catch yourself listening for coughs in the dark. You count them like sheep. 1, 2, 3, silence. Then a deep hack from across camp, and you exhale, relieved that it's not someone from your wagon. Not yet. You start boiling all your water. You scrape every dish twice. You even fashion a crude latrine pit away from camp and try to convince others to use it. Most do. A few roll their eyes and go wherever the urge strikes. You quietly judge them. There's no pride left on the trail, but there is a kind of desperate hygiene-based hierarchy, and you're clawing your way to the top. That night, you manage to rinse your face with cold stream water and sit by the fire, feeling almost human. You clutch your journal, scrawling down every little detail, not because it matters to anyone else, but because you want to remember. The pain, the fear, the weird moments of peace between disasters, the way the stars look when the world feels like it's ending, the way your hands shake just before sunrise knowing that the next day could be worse. But also, strangely, you feel stronger, more focused. You know now that survival out here isn't about being brave, it's about being careful, about watching what you eat, where you walk, who you trust, and how clean your shovel is. You fall asleep that night with a hand on your water pouch and a whisper of hope that tomorrow you'll all still be alive. You wake to hoofbeats and panic. Not your panic yet, but the urgent low murmurs of your neighbours and the unmistakable clatter of oxen hooves where they shouldn't be. You scramble out from beneath your wagon, still tangled in your blanket, heart thudding in a strange rhythm. In the pre-dawn blue you see the silhouettes of animals bolting across the open plain, and someone's shouting, "The oxen, they're spooked!" You don't know why they're running or what set them off, but now you're sprinting after 2 half-ton beasts in boots that are barely tied and breath fogging in the cold morning air. Welcome to the wild side of the trail. The thing they don't tell you about the West is that nature is not a friendly backdrop. It's not a painting of purple mountains and gentle meadows. It's raw, untamed, and every bit as likely to kill you as disease or bad beans. That peaceful sunrise, it might come with the side of wolves. That quiet stream could be full of leeches, or worse, already claimed by something much hungrier than you. You catch one of your oxen near a cluster of low trees, wide-eyed and trembling. The other wanders in a daze, tail still twitching, ribs rising and falling like bellows. Spooked by a coyote, someone says. Or maybe a mountain lion. You don't see anything, just a thin line of paw prints in the dirt and the telltale stench of fear clinging to the animals like smoke. You soothe them as best you can, rubbing their flanks, murmuring nonsense. Eventually, you get them re-yoked, but the morning's been stolen. The caravan will leave late. Again. As the day wears on, the full scope of the wilderness begins to show itself. First, it's the buffalo. Massive herds spotted in the distance, their brown, shaggy shapes moving like a single living sea across the plains. The sight is stunning, majestic even, until one of them decides to veer dangerously close. Everyone freezes, children are shushed, rifles appear like conjured objects. You don't breathe. The animal huffs once, snorts and turns away, disappearing into the herd again like a ghost of meat and muscle. Crisis averted for now, but not everything out here is awe-inspiring. Some of it's just unsettling. You come across a carcass, fresh, not human. A deer, perhaps. Its ribs are exposed, the stomach half-eaten. Flies buzz around it like a halo of rot. You look at the bite marks. Clean. Too clean. Something out there has teeth. No, he was not eating jerky. Your group tightens that night. Wagons pulled close, rifles loaded and within arm's reach. You go to bed clutching yours like a security blanket. Here's your historical fact. Buffalo were both a blessing and a threat to pioneers. Their meat was prized, but hunting them was risky. Stampedes could destroy entire wagon trains. One recorded event described a herd that ran through a camp at night, smashing wagons and scattering supplies for miles. A real we're gonna die situation. And the quirky one, pioneers sometimes slept with pigs or goats in their wagons at night to stay warm and deter wild animals. There are multiple accounts of goats acting as makeshift alarm systems, bleating wildly when danger approached. One family even trained their pig to growl when wolves came near. His name was Winston. Winston was a hero. As for debates, there's still discussion among scholars about just how dangerous the wildlife really was. Diaries often exaggerate attacks, turning curious coyotes into mythical monsters. But bones don't lie. Animal attacks did happen, especially when the wagons crossed into more isolated or mountainous regions. The danger wasn't always the fangs and claws. Sometimes it was what the animals dragged away in the night. Food, shoes, even a toddler's. You start to take more precautions. Food is hung from trees or buried in caches at night. Livestock is hobbled and guarded. Children are lectured repeatedly not to wander, though one small boy keeps chasing birds crackle. He's on a personal mission from heaven. You carry your rifle more openly, even when walking. It's not just about looking brave, it's about being ready. Midway through the week, your wagon train spots something odd. A pile of bones, arranged neatly in a circle. Too neat to be natural. There are no wagon ruts nearby, no graves, just the eerie arrangement and a small bundle of fur in the centre. You all stand around it in silence. A few mutter about rituals. One man crosses himself. Another says, probably just kids from a local tribe, and laughs too loudly. But no one kicks the bones. You leave them, unnerved. You make camp that night near a thicket, hoping the dense brush will shield you from whatever's out there. But the woods bring their own threats, bears mostly, and sometimes snakes. Someone in the party insists they saw a cougar slinking through the trees. You believe them. Not because you saw it too, but because nothing feels impossible out here anymore. The land doesn't care about your plans. It doesn't care how well you packed or how many prayers you said in Independence. Out here, you're just meat wrapped in canvas. Still, you adapt. You learn to read tracks, small impressions in the mud, tufts of fur, broken branches. You recognise the warning calls of birds, the rustle of something large in the grass. You know now that silence isn't peaceful. It's the moment right before something leaps. That night there's a scream. It's short, sharp, and stops as quickly as it started. Everyone jumps, rifles are grabbed. You stumble from your blanket, heart a drumbeat in your ears. The scream came from one of the smaller wagons, the elderly couple from Illinois. You rush over and find the woman, pale, shaking, pointing to the edge of camp. "It took our goat," she whispers. Her husband's trying to console her, but his voice is trembling too. You look where she's pointing, just a dark shape in the distance, loping away. The next day, the group is quieter. No jokes at breakfast, no fiddling, just grim, focused motion. You repair a broken wheel in silence, the creak of wood and the click of metal echoing through the still air. Everyone feels it, the way the wilderness breathes around you, hungry and watching. But you keep moving, because the only way out of this place is through it. You imagined the Oregon Trail would be one long, continuous trek, steady rhythm of wheels crunching over dirt, your boots falling into step with the horizon, day after day of forward motion. But no one warned you that you'd be spending nearly as much time not moving as you do travelling. The hard truth hits sometime during your second week, as you sit by the side of the trail for the third hour in a row, swatting flies and watching someone else's wagon wheel get mended with a level of drama usually reserved for battlefield surgery. Welcome to the hurry up and wait portion of the trail. You wake at dawn, ready to march forward, muscles aching but spirit oddly intact, and then someone's oxen are missing, or a wheel has shattered, or someone stepped on a nail and is now rolling around in agony. Sometimes it's a sudden debate about which fork in the trail to take. Other times it's just fatigue. You'll be lined up, wagons hitched, ready to roll, and then you sit, and sit, and sit. Your only motion is the quiet inner scream echoing inside your skull. You try to be patient, really you do, but trail time stretches like saltwater taffy in the sun. There's no clock, just the position of the sun and the feeling that this day will never, ever end. You watch a man spend 45 minutes trying to untangle a rope from his own axle. A child throws a tantrum that could win awards. Someone's cow just wandered off again, mooing into the void, and they're giving chase like it owes them money. There's something uniquely exhausting about standing still on the trail. When you're moving, at least it feels like progress. But when you're stuck, the reality of the landscape starts to close in. It's flat, it's hot, it's buzzing with flies the size of bottle caps. The prairie wind kicks up a fine grit that sneaks into your eyes, your teeth, your undergarments, everywhere. The sun's a bully, and the shade, when you can find it, is already claimed by someone snoring under a wagon. And yet these slow moments are when you see your fellow travellers most clearly. They lounge on wagon tongues like sunbathing lizards, their faces slack with boredom. Some tinker endlessly with tools, others scribble in journals or patch socks with grim determination. A few manage to nap in poses that defy logic, curled on sacks of beans draped over barrels, upside down in someone's lap. You envy their talent. One man passes time by whittling a spoon, another teaches his toddler how to whistle. You try to read a few pages of Gulliver's Travels, but the words blur from heat and distraction. Eventually, you just stare into the distance, trying to remember what trees used to look like. You haven't seen a proper one in days. Occasionally you overhear snippets of philosophy from those as bored as you. Maybe we're not meant to get to Oregon, someone mutters. Maybe the journey is the destination. You want to punch them, just a little. By midday you're finally on the move again, only for the oxen to slow within minutes, one of them developing what's generously called a trail limp. You've now learnt the term hoof rot, and you wish you hadn't. There's also spavin, founder, and a dozen other ailments that can afflict your livestock and bring your whole life to a screeching halt. Turns out the real MVPs of this journey are your animals, and they're just as fed up as you are. Another wagon ahead loses a wheel. Again. This time it snaps so dramatically you half expect it to burst into flames. You pitch in with the repairs because if you don't, everyone's delayed. You lift the side of the wagon while someone else wedges in a rock, and another hammers a makeshift peg into place. It's a crude patch job, but it'll hold for another 10 miles. Maybe. Here's your historical fact. The average wagon wheel could last about 200 and 300 miles before needing serious repairs or replacement. That's assuming ideal conditions, which, spoiler alert, you never have. Spare parts were essential, and many families travelled with extra wheels lashed to the sides of their wagons, like donuts on a really bad road trip. Quirky fact. Some pioneers created a sort of wagon waiting club, unofficial groups who passed the time playing music, telling stories or carving initials into nearby rocks. One man even built a crude checkerboard into the side of his wagon, using flattened bullets as pieces. It's unclear whether this was out of boredom or some deep need to win something on the trail. And on the scholarly side, there's a debate over whether the long delays and frequent stops were a result of poor planning, or simply unavoidable due to the unpredictable nature of the landscape. Some historians argue that most wagon parties left too early, loaded too much, and relied too heavily on untested equipment. Others counter that even the best planned caravans fell prey to the chaos of bad weather, sick animals, and human drama. Basically, no one agrees, but everyone got stuck. Your own caravan develops a rhythm. 3 hours of slow progress, followed by 2 of sheer immobility. A sort of lurching dance with the trail, clumsy but inevitable. You begin to predict the moments when things will grind to a halt. A low hill, half the wagons will stall, a muddy dip, someone will lose a boot or an ox, a river in the distance. Forget moving, just break out the coffee and prepare to wait until someone builds a raft. These pauses become strange little micro-worlds. One stop turns into a baking party, with everyone attempting some form of bread using flour and a campfire. Another day, someone holds a race among the children, who bolt across the prairie barefoot and yelling, like tiny feral thunderclaps. You cheer them on half-heartedly, a pot of beans in one hand. But there are also the darker still moments, the ones where someone's illness forces a full stop and everyone's smiles turn brittle. Or when a wagon has to be abandoned entirely, its owners transferring what they can to others, their eyes wide with quiet panic. One man buries a chest of tools beneath a boulder, swearing he'll come back for them someday. You know he won't. That night, the wagon train doesn't even bother to set out the next morning. Too many issues, oxen too tired, children too sick, too much friction among the group, tempers flare. Someone shouts about poor leadership, someone else mutters about mutiny. You sit quietly and stir the beans, wondering if your ancestors will remember this as courage or utter lunacy. You fall asleep staring at the stars again, wondering how far you've come. Not far, not nearly far enough. But tomorrow, maybe, you'll move again. There's a particular sound that makes your stomach clench on the Oregon Trail. It's not the distant howl of a coyote, or the wet cough of a sick child. It's the sharp wooden crack that means something just snapped. A wagon tongue, a wheel rim, a spoke. Doesn't matter. When you hear it, you freeze mid-step, heart stuttering, already calculating how long this new problem will delay the caravan. This time it's your own wagon. Of course it is! You rush around to the side, heart pounding, and there it is, a splintered wheel hub, cracked clean through. Your oxen, now unhitched and wide-eyed, stomp in the dirt, agitated by the sudden jolt. One of them gives you a look that says, "I told you this would happen," which is impressive for an animal that mostly communicates through drool. Everyone says the trail tests you like it's some noble trial of the human spirit, but really it just breaks things. Wheels, wagons, harnesses, spirits. The same way water wears down stone, the trail wears down everything you brought with you, especially your patience. It doesn't happen all at once, it chips away, one jolt, one delay, one snapped axle at a time. You gather your repair kit, now worn down to a few precious tools, and examine the damage. You've done this before, once on your cousin's wagon, twice on your neighbour's, but it never gets easier. Wood swells in the heat, iron bands rust and warp, and there's never quite enough tar to keep everything sealed. You brace the broken section with a splintered board and rope, muttering to yourself as you hammer and tie. Around you the trail does what it always does, continues on, indifferent to your delay. That's the real cruelty of the trail, it never stops. There's no pause button, no mercy. While you kneel in the dirt with a cracked wheel and a growing sense of doom, the wind keeps blowing, the sun keeps rising, and the rest of the caravan is already inching ahead. They'll wait a little while, maybe an hour, maybe 2, but eventually someone will come back and gently say, "We can't hold up any longer." And if you're not ready, you get left behind. This time you're lucky. A younger couple from the next wagon helps you lift the frame while you slide in the brace. You grunt and strain together, sweat pouring into your eyes, but the wheel is secured, sort of. It'll hold probably, maybe, long enough to make it another 10 miles and then you'll do it all again. Later that day, you're walking beside the wagon, testing the repair, when you catch sight of someone else's disaster. A full axle shattered, wood in pieces, wagon leaning hard to one side like it's drunk. The family sits in silence. The father stares at the damage like if he squints hard enough it'll fix itself. The mother's rocking a baby in her lap. The older son is digging a shallow pit to bury whatever they can't carry. You've seen this before. Everyone has. It's a trail ritual by now. When the wagon breaks beyond repair, the family either finds space in someone else's or gives up and turns back, assuming they have enough supplies and strength to survive the return trip. Few do. Most just leave things behind. That family's chest of linens, abandoned. That iron stove, offloaded with a thud. You walk past them, nodding solemnly, and keep your eyes forward. Here's a historical fact that's not exactly inspiring. Nearly 1 in 10 wagons broke beyond repair on the trail, and many families lack the skills or supplies to fix them. There were no hardware stores out here, just what you brought and what you could scavenge. If your wheel cracked and you didn't have spare spokes, you were stuck, sometimes permanently. Quirky fact, people got creative. One man famously replaced a shattered wagon wheel with a giant slice of cottonwood carved into a crude circle. It worked, sort of, until it hit a rut and split in 2. Another group used bedposts to brace a broken axle, tying them on with strips of rawhide. Desperation makes surprisingly decent engineers. And as for scholarly debate, there's long been an argument about whether the wagons used on the trail were truly suited for the journey. The standard prairie schooner design was light, sure, but it wasn't built to survive 2,000 miles of punishment. Some historians argue they were woefully underprepared, too cheaply built and structurally flimsy. Others claim that pioneers did the best they could with what they had, and that it was always going to be a gamble no matter the wagon quality. Back in camp that night, your wagon creaks ominously as you settle in beside it. You lie awake on your pallet, staring at the wooden frame above you, and wondering which piece will betray you next. You know the wheel is a ticking time bomb. You know the canvas top has a growing tear, and you know that one of the oxen has started limping slightly, which means you're probably due for another crisis tomorrow. You're not alone in your paranoia. Around the fire, conversations now revolve around repairs. Who's got spare grease? Anyone have a few extra nails? Did anyone bring actual carpentry skills? Or is everyone just faking it like you are? The answers are usually no, yes, and definitely the latter. The funny part, if there's anything funny left, is that you start to bond over it. Misery loves company, and trail repairs are the great equalizer. No matter how prepared or rich someone was back in Missouri, they're just another sweaty, exhausted amateur mechanic now, pounding in wooden pegs and hoping it holds until sundown. You trade tricks too. Someone swears by soaking rope in bacon grease to make it last longer. Another swears at that person when the rope slips loose the next day. One woman reveals she's been using strips of her old corset to lash down cargo. It's tough, flexible, and already full of broken dreams. You admire her resourcefulness and make a mental note to sacrifice your own undergarments if things get desperate. You fall asleep that night with the image of your wheel seared into your brain. You dream of spokes snapping like brittle bones, of your wagon crumbling into a pile of wood and flour sacks. You wake up with the sun in your eyes and the familiar stiffness in your back, and then you hear it again, that creak, the wheel whispering to you like a ghost, soon. And you sigh, get up, and get ready to fix it, again. You can pinpoint the exact moment your trail diet starts to unravel. It's around week 3 when you open a flour sack and find it crawling with tiny black bugs. You stare at the squirming mass in numb horror, then shake the sack violently as if that'll magically fix it. It doesn't. You pick out as many as you can, mutter a few curse words, and then cook with it anyway. Because out here, the line between edible and disgusting is thinner than the soup you're about to make. Food on the trail is not a pleasure. It is a requirement. You eat to keep walking. You chew because not doing so leads to dizziness, weakness, and worse. The early days were full of variety: salt pork, beans, hardtack, rice, dried apples. You even remember eating pie once before someone dropped the last of the preserves trying to chase a goose out of their wagon. Now, it's beans, flour, and what might be squirrel, though no one's asking too many questions. Every family rationed carefully, or at least they tried to. You remember sitting around the fire with your little sack of supplies, counting spoonfuls like you were handling gold dust. 2 scoops of rice, a pinch of salt, just enough lard to make it stick together in a sad little ball. But rationing only works when everyone's healthy. And on the trail, nobody's healthy for long. Sick people need broth. Kids need snacks. You use more food than you planned. And suddenly that 6-month supply you smugly packed back in Independence is looking suspiciously light. You've started foraging when you can. Wild onions, bitter greens, the occasional lucky bush of berries. Sometimes you find mushrooms, and someone from another wagon swears they're safe. You boil them in stew and wait to see who starts convulsing. No one does. That night feels like a victory. But most days, you eat the same thing. Flour and water, fried on a skillet, until it barely resembles a tortilla, then dipped in bean sludge. If you're lucky, there's a shred of dried meat to add a bit of chew. If not, well, there's always imagination. One afternoon, a group of kids catches a rabbit. They parade it through camp like they just took down a buffalo, proudly holding it by the ears. You help clean it, thankful for fresh meat, even if the thing's barely bigger than your boot. That night, everyone gets a spoonful of rabbit stew, and for a moment it almost tastes like home. Then the rationing gets tighter. You're walking longer hours and burning more calories, but the food is dwindling. You see it in the way people chew, slowly savouring every bite. In the way people eye each other's plates. Not with greed, but longing. Your kids are getting skinnier. You're getting snappier. Hunger crawls into your bones and settles there. Here's your historical fact. On average, pioneers needed 2,000 to 3,000 calories a day just to keep up with the physical exertion of the trail. But most didn't eat that much. Rations were usually 1/500 calories or less, especially once the journey wore on and supplies ran low. Malnutrition was common. Scurvy, caused by lack of vitamin C, ran rampant, softening gums, loosening teeth, and turning joints into screaming bags of pain. Quirky fact. Some desperate souls tried boiling their leather shoes to make broth. Yes, really. The leather was usually tanned with animal fat and chemicals, making it technically edible, if you ignored the flavour, texture, and intense shame. One traveller swore by stewing old saddle straps with wild garlic. It tastes like regret, he reportedly said. But he lived to tell the tale. Scholars still debate whether most pioneers packed properly for the trail. Journals show a wide range. Some families were meticulous, bringing carefully measured sacks of flour, beans, bacon, and even dried fruit. Others showed up with sacks of candy, bottles of brandy, and not a single potato. Some argue that travel guides of the time were misleading, emphasizing comfort foods over practical ones. Others blame optimism. People simply believed they'd restock easily along the way. They didn't. Speaking of restocking, trading posts and forts become lifelines. When word spreads that Fort Kearney is a day away, the whole caravan gets a boost. You imagine fresh bread, maybe butter. You try not to think about bacon, it hurts too much. But the closer you get, the more people start whispering warnings. The prices are steep. They're running out. Don't expect much. And they're right. When you arrive, the fort is half-stocked and fully overpriced. Flour costs double, salted meat is stringy and foul-smelling. But you buy what you can anyway, because the alternative is hunger. One man sells his boots for a barrel of molasses. Another trades a rifle for coffee beans. You swap a cracked mirror and 3 spools of thread for half a ham that smells only slightly like feet. That night, you fry it over a smoky fire and convince yourself it's delicious. But some things can't be bought. You dream about eggs, about real bread, not the dense pan-fried bricks you've been choking down. You dream about peaches in syrup, mashed potatoes, cake. You wake up chewing air. Once, in desperation, you lick a spoon just to remember the taste of lard. It's not your proudest moment. And yet, despite everything, there's a weird camaraderie in suffering together. Food becomes a shared obsession. Someone finds a patch of wild mint, and you all descend on it like bears. A child discovers a few berries, and a line forms behind them like it's a 5-star buffet. You cook together, share leftovers, if there are any, and trade recipes that are more wishful thinking than anything else. Someday, someone says, I'm going to bake a real pie with butter and sugar. Everyone sighs like they're remembering a lost love. Then one morning, disaster. One of the wagons topples while crossing a ridge, and a barrel of flour bursts open. It spills down the slope, a tragic avalanche of white powder, vanishing into the dirt. You all stand there stunned. The grown man drops to his knees and tries to scoop it back into a bucket with his bare hands. No one laughs. You help him. Because out here, flour is worth more than gold. That night, you eat slowly, chewing each bite like it owes you something. You stare into the fire, belly still aching, and wonder how long you can keep doing this. But when someone passes you a sliver of dried apple, you smile. Because it's sweet, because you didn't expect it, and because tomorrow you'll walk again. You'll eat what you have, and you'll hope, always hope, that the next bite will be better. You hear it before you see it. The low rhythmic roar like distant thunder, trapped in a box. Everyone perks up. The wagon's slow, even the oxen seem to pause. You follow the sound to its source, cresting a gentle rise, and there it is, a river, wide and slow-moving, slicing through the earth like a lazy blue vein. It doesn't look especially menacing. In fact, it almost looks inviting, glinting in the afternoon sun. You allow yourself the luxury of hope. Maybe this one will be easy. It won't be. River crossings are the true test of your will and also of your wagon's structural integrity. This one, the Platte, or maybe the Loo, depending on who you ask, is just wide enough to be annoying and just deep enough to be terrifying. The first problem is figuring out how deep it really is. A few men wade in, pants hiked up, poking the riverbed with sticks like they're afraid it might bite. One of them goes in too far and slips. When he stumbles out coughing and soaked, the group collectively groans. Gonna need to float it, someone says. No one wants to float it. Floating means sealing everything inside the wagon, wrapping the canvas tight and trusting that your home on wheels won't become a waterlogged coffin. It means unpacking anything precious, clothing, food, people, and ferrying them over by hand or raft, one precarious trip at a time. It also means praying your oxen don't panic halfway across and drag your belongings down with them. The second problem is that floating is a generous term. These aren't boats, they're wagons. Wagons with gaps between the planks and rusted iron parts. You saw one go under just last week, lost to a surprise current and poor planning. The family was lucky, they swam, their bedding didn't. You start waterproofing, you smear tar along the seams, lash barrels inside tight, and use oilskin to wrap the food stores. You pull the heaviest items, stove, tools, extra flour, out and drag them around the riverbank. Then you look to the oxen, they'll have to swim. You tie ropes to their yokes and hope they're feeling as brave today. When it's your turn, your stomach drops. The current looks faster now, even though you know it's probably just nerves. You wade in with the animals first, gripping the lead rope tight. The cold hits your knees, then your waist, and suddenly the river feels a lot less charming. The oxen snort, hesitant. You pull gently, whispering nonsense encouragement. Come on, Butterscotch, don't you dare drown me. Somehow you make it across, soaked and shivering but alive. Then it's the wagon's turn. You and 2 others ease it into the water, hearts pounding. It starts to float, bobbing awkwardly, swaying like it's had too much to drink. The oxen swim, the current tugs, the wheels catch on a submerged rock, and the whole thing tilts dangerously. You yell. Someone throws a rope. For one awful second you think you're going to lose everything. But then the wagon rights itself with a violent lurch and drifts forward. You pull it ashore and collapse beside it, panting, every muscle in your body screaming. Your hands are blistered from the rope. Your boots are filled with river silt. But the wagon is intact. Your flour is dry. And most importantly, no one died. Here's your historical fact. River crossings were one of the deadliest parts of the Oregon Trail. Drowning was the second leading cause of death, right behind disease. Some rivers were hundreds of feet wide with strong currents, and without bridges, every crossing was a gamble. Even experienced travelers often lost wagons, livestock, and occasionally entire families to unexpected accidents. Quirky fact, some pioneers brought inflatable hides or bull boats, frames made from willow branches covered with buffalo skin, just for river crossings. These worked surprisingly well if you didn't mind sitting in a stinking hair-covered water bowl while clinging to your biscuit barrel. One woman reportedly floated her wagon's contents across in a wash tub. Twice, she became something of a trail legend. And the debate? Scholars still disagree on how often pioneers chose to ferry their wagons across rivers versus floating them. Some argue that most groups avoided floating at all costs, using rafts or even building temporary bridges. Others suggest that the time and resources to build a raft were usually too great, making floating the wagon the more common, if riskier, option. Either way, the odds were never great. After the crossing, the camp sets up nearby. Everyone's too tired to go further. Fires are lit, soggy clothes hung on wagon wheels, and wet boots removed with pained grunts. The kids play along the shore, throwing rocks and chasing frogs, as if they hadn't just witnessed several near-death experiences. You check your supplies. A few sacks of flour are damp around the edges, but salvageable. Your rifle is fine. Your coffee grounds, slightly soggy. You grieve quietly. Still, it could have been worse. You walk past a neighbour's wagon and see a crate of shattered jars, pickled beets oozing down the wood in tragic purple streaks. The woman who owned them looks like she might cry. Someone tries to comfort her, but she just walks away. That was her winter supply. You say nothing, just keep walking. That evening, someone pulls out a fiddle and a few people actually dance. It's strange seeing laughter after so much fear, but maybe that's why it happens. Relief, that for once you made it. That night the food tastes better than it should. Just beans and dry bread, but they go down easy, washed down with river-chilled water and that weird feeling of triumph. You feel like you passed a test. The trail tried to swallow you and you crawled out the other side, coughing and soaked, but still standing. The next morning you pack up again. The river lies behind you, quiet now, like it never tried to kill you at all. You give it one last look before climbing onto the wagon tongue. The oxen grunt, the wheels groan, the trail stretches forward. And so you go. You've heard people say that the prairie looks the same day after day, like some kind of stretched out wallpaper of grass and skier, but after a few hundred miles of walking it, you know better. Well, it doesn't stay the same, it feels the same. The repetition grinds into your bones. Greenish yellow grass, pale blue sky, and that ever-present layer of dust swirling at ankle level. But under that sameness, change brews, subtle at first. A cough that lingers too long, a child who won't eat, a man who hasn't stood up from his bedroll in 2 days. That's when you start hearing it whispered through the wagons. There's fever in the camp. You don't know exactly what kind it is, nobody does. Out here, all fevers get lumped together under vague names like trail fever or plain sickness. Sometimes it's dysentery again, other times it's cholera, or typhoid, or that catch-all horror ague, which just means they're shaking and we don't know why. Whatever this is, it's fast and brutal. 3 people are down by sunset. By the next morning, 2 more. You begin to wonder if the river you just crossed left something behind in everyone's guts. You do what you can. You boil water, scrub the dishes with ash, hang wet clothes in the sun. A woman from another wagon suggests burning dried sage around the sick, which might help or might just make the whole wagon smell like a fireplace. Either way, you do it. You soak cloths in vinegar and press them to foreheads. You mix a bit of whiskey with river water and call it medicine. Someone starts praying louder than usual. The sick groan, sweat pouring down their faces. You recognise the pattern now. It starts with the chills, then a fever so high they stop making sense. They mutter nonsense or speak in long-forgotten languages. Some call out for mothers or people who have been dead for years, then the shaking, and then for some, the silence. You try to stay strong, keep walking, keep hauling, but the air feels thick with dread. Everyone's a little quieter, a little less patient. The kids don't play as much. The campfires feel colder, no one sings. You overhear 2 men arguing over whether to press on or rest. One insists the trail is safer than sitting still. The other says the sick need time to recover. A third voice snaps, "You think the trail cares what we need?" You don't vote. You're too busy hauling water, feeding broth to your wagon mate who hasn't stood in a day and a half. You clean a cloth in silence, watching their chest rise and fall with effort. You tell yourself they'll pull through. They always have, until they don't. Here's your historical fact. Illnesses like cholera and typhoid were rampant on the Oregon Trail. especially in the warm months. Unsanitary conditions, shared water sources, and tight living quarters created the perfect storm. Once an outbreak began, it could tear through a wagon train in days. Entire families were lost between river crossings. Quirky fact? Some travellers swore by prairie cures that ranged from mildly ineffective to outright dangerous. Common treatments included turpentine, tobacco smoke enemas, and drinking mercury-laced blue mass pills. One widely believed remedy for fever was to bury the patient up to their neck in cool soil. If they didn't die of exposure, they might have recovered, or just caught pneumonia instead. Debate-wise, scholars are still trying to determine how many deaths went unrecorded due to improvised burials and the sheer volume of travel. Diaries and ledgers offer only glimpses, often with vague notations like, "We lost 2 last night," or "buried another by the trail." Some argue the true death toll could be twice as high as estimates suggest. Others think it's impossible to know, the disease didn't leave tidy records. As the days crawl by, the sick either improve or vanish. You dig 2 more graves. This time you help build a little rock mound over one so the animals won't dig it up. You place a makeshift cross on top, a broken wagon spoke tied together with twine. The woman buried there was someone's aunt. You barely spoke to her, but the way her niece cried over her, that sticks with you. When the fever passes, it doesn't leave relief. It leaves emptiness. Places where people used to sit. Plates that don't need filling anymore. Everyone walks slower now, like they're carrying the ghosts of the ones they've lost. And maybe they are. You feel it too, a weight in your chest that's got nothing to do with packs or miles. And then the weird part, life keeps going. A boy chases a grasshopper and laughs like he's never heard someone die. A couple gets engaged by the fire one evening, the man proposing with a ring carved from bone. Someone else finds a patch of wild strawberries and brings them back, passing them out like treasure. You get 3, you eat them slowly, trying to remember what joy used to taste like. And just like that, the caravan begins to breathe again. Slowly, hesitantly, one foot in front of the other, until a new kind of fear arrives. One of the wagons spots smoke on the horizon, not from a fire, but a signal. Vertical plumes rising in deliberate succession. A few people tense immediately. "Indians," someone whispers. The word is thick with worry, but also with ignorance. Because so far the only indigenous people you've met have been curious, cautious, and mostly unimpressed with your struggling caravan. You traded for jerky and moccasins at a distance, nodding, unsure of how to act. No violence, no danger, just wary strangers on their own land watching you stumble through it. But still the signal rattles people. Old prejudices rise up like blisters. Men load their rifles, women clutch their children. Someone ties a bowie knife to the wagon's side like that'll scare off a war party. The wagon master urges calm, but the air is tight. You don't know what's coming. Maybe nothing. Maybe just more prairie. That night the fever seems far away, but the unease stays. You lie in your bedroll half asleep, listening to the creak of canvas in the wind and the soft murmurs of your companions. Somewhere out there the land shifts and breathes and watches. The fever took your strength, but the trail keeps going, and so must you. There's a change in the mood after the fever breaks, tense, quiet, a kind of collective holding of breath. No one says it loud, but it's clear. The trail is entering new territory, and not just in miles. You're moving deeper into lands you were warned about, where maps turn vague and rumour takes over. Every hill feels like it's hiding something. Every smoke signal in the distance is met with silence and side eyes. Everyone becomes a little more cautious, a little more suspicious. The word Indians hangs in the air like thunder you haven't heard yet. You've already passed a few small indigenous camps, distant figures across the prairie, watching. The first time you saw them, it sent a jolt through your chest. Not out of fear, but out of sheer not knowing. You were raised on stories, scalping ambushes, arrows through the night. But what you saw were people, families. A group sitting beneath a canvas tent, eating. 2 children chasing each other. One man on horseback staring calmly at your train as you passed. No weapons drawn, no drama, just observation. And yet the myths are louder than the facts. That's how fear works. So when your wagon train approaches a cluster of teepees one afternoon, the response is mixed. Some people tighten their grips on rifles. Others prepare small trade goods, cloth, buttons, beads, hoping this will be like last time, quiet, maybe even friendly. You're somewhere near Pawnee or Oto territory now, though no one is quite sure where one nation's land ends and another's begins. The government drew some lines, but they never asked anyone else about them. A small group approaches, 4 men and 2 women, draped in hides and woven cloth, mounted on horses that look like they were born from the wind. They are not armed, or if they are, it's subtle. Their faces are calm and readable. The wagon master steps forward, hat in hand, offering the universal peace language of trade: sugar, tobacco, salt. One of the women nods. She steps down from her horse and reaches into a satchel, producing dried meat and a pair of handmade moccasins. The trade begins. No one speaks the same language, but gestures do enough. You give them a tin cup, they offer a leather pouch. A boy from your group reaches out to touch one of their horses, and the animal flicks its ears but doesn't move away. Laughter trickles out on both sides. Not a flood, but a stream, something human. Still, not everyone's convinced. You hear muttering behind you, words like savages and ambush. The man from Kentucky who never shuts up says something about arrows and smallpox. You want to turn around and ask him where his shoes came from, since those sure look like Lakota's design. But you let it go. The trail's long. Idiocy has time to wear itself out. You watch as one of the Pawnee men points westward, makes a motion with his hand, zigzag up and down. Mountains, you think. He's warning you. The pass ahead is rough. He points to your oxen and makes a tired gesture. You nod, grateful. Even when you don't speak the language, you understand the weight of kindness. Here's your historical fact. While popular culture paints indigenous interactions on the Oregon Trail as violent, most were peaceful and often helpful. Native tribes frequently traded with emigrants, offering food, directions, and animal care. In many cases, the real aggression came from the settlers, not the other way around. Treaties were ignored, land was taken, and retaliation became inevitable. Quirky fact: some pioneers reported receiving directions from indigenous travelers using carefully arranged rocks or bundles of sticks as trail markers. Others were guided by tribal members for small fees. One journal tells of a young boy who led an entire wagon train through a safe mountain pass in exchange for a bright blue shirt. As for scholarly debate, historians continue to wrestle with the narrative of Indian hostility on the trail. Some argue that the fear was stoked intentionally by newspapers and officials to justify land seizure and military expansion. Others suggest that tensions were simply the natural result of too many people crossing into territory without consent or context. The truth lies, as it often does, in the middle. Cooperation existed. Resket. So did conflict. But the stereotypes. Mostly built from anxiety and bad headlines. Back in your wagon circle, the atmosphere is complicated. The trade has gone smoothly, no signs of danger. But as the Pawnee group rides off, one of them glances back. A look you can't quite read. Something between pity and warning. That night, the caravan eats well. The dried meat is smoky and rich, better than anything you've had in weeks. But no one talks much. Everyone keeps glancing into the darkness beyond the wagons, like they're waiting for the next thing to go wrong. You lie awake and think about the woman with the leather satchel, about the way she looked at your wagon, your cracked wheel, your bent axle, your tired family, and offered you meat anyway. Not because she had to, not because she owed you, but because she saw you, saw the struggle, and gave what she could. You don't write that down in your journal. It feels too big, too different from the stories you were raised on. You don't have the words for it yet. The next day, the land changes again. More hills, the kind of trail that chews up oxen hooves and spits them out as blood-stained ruts. One of the children rides in the wagon because her legs are covered in blisters. You see a fresh set of tracks beside yours, hoof prints that didn't belong to anyone in the caravan. Someone's watching. You don't feel threatened, just noticed. You pass another small camp, this one empty, though clearly recently used. Ashes still warm, feathers tied to branches, tools set neatly against a tree. You walk quietly. No one touches anything, out of respect or fear, or both. Later, someone carves a message into a cottonwood. No trouble here. You don't know if it's meant for other pioneers or whoever might be following. Maybe it's just a plea, a hope. That night, the wind howls through the wagons like it's trying to tell you something. You pull your blanket tighter and listen. Out here, everyone's a stranger. But not all strangers are enemies. You think you've learnt the rules of the trail. Wake up early, boil the coffee, yoke the oxen, walk until your knees hate you, and pray the wagon doesn't tip. It's a cruel routine, sure, but at least it's predictable. Until it isn't. One day the skies change. Not gradually, like a polite little storm on the horizon. No, the wind kicks up out of nowhere. The sky turns a kind of bruised green, and the temperature drops like a bad omen. You're caught mid-mile with nothing around but sagebrush and anxiety. You don't have time to pitch camp properly. The wind tears through the canvas like it's trying to peel the wagons apart. Dust blows sideways, thick as smoke, stinging your eyes and coating your teeth in grit. You yell, but your voice vanishes into the storm. Someone's bonnet flies past you like a sad little ghost. A barrel of beans tips over. You watch, in slow-motion horror, as a week's worth of food rolls into a gully. There's lightning too, flashes that illuminate the prairie in brutal strobe-light bursts. You grab whatever you can, your coat, your child, your skillet if you're lucky, and huddle beneath the wagon. The oxen moan and stomp, barely restrained. The canvas above you flaps like a sail in open water, and for a second you wonder if the whole contraption's going to take flight with you in it. The rain starts sharp and sideways, needles of ice-cold water slicing across the prairie. You're soaked in minutes. It ends as quickly as it began,